A round of frigid weather had many Texans facing sub-freezing temperatures last week, and the cold led to record-breaking demand for electricity across the state. Numbers from ERCOT showed the previous peak energy demand record for January was set back in 2018. Back then, Texans set the record at just under 66,000 megawatts. Last Sunday, the state shattered that record, with peak demand closing in on 71,000 megawatts. The next day, we shattered it again, topping 76,000, and another record on Tuesday, with peak demand exceeding 78,000 megawatts. During those days, ERCOT put out a call for energy conservation, but the new records have some worried about future demand on the system. Politics reporter Ryan Chandler spoke with the CEO of ERCOT about how the state will meet the need for energy.
You know, every time the supply and the demand on the grid gets a little too close, I notice that wind and solar are always the first scapegoats or points of blame. Because maybe the sun isn't out or there's less wind than we expect. But, you know, of course, back in February 21, natural gas was also hindered by the extreme cold as well. Can you kind of break down how all of the different energy sources that feed our grid play into the overall supply and which are the most reliable this week?
It's a question of needing to have all the pieces of the puzzle working together in order to get through an event like this. What we want to do is just try to explain facts as to what's happening on the grid. And so, you know, those facts can vary based on what, you know, the season is and what's going on and what time of day it is. For example, during the winter, we're always going to see those peaks typically when the sun goes down and things get very cold. So, you know, obviously solar resources won't play a role in helping to deliver energy during those peaks in the wintertime. And then, you know, as we look at this week in particular, you know, we really needed all of the pieces and parts to work together. So we needed the thermal power plants to be available. We needed the batteries to all be available and ready to go. And then wind is the main variable then that we look at that, you know, just depends on whether the wind is blowing. For this event, the wind performance, the wind has been blowing a little bit less than what is seasonally normal this time of year. So that does help to contribute a little bit, but it's not blame. It's just a fact, you know, look, the wind blows, sometimes it blows hard and sometimes it doesn't blow hard. But the windmills themselves, they've seen really good performance in terms of very little icing. So we haven't been losing the available windmills to that kind of an issue.
Every December, January, February, people are still anxious. Ever since that February 21 storm, every time the temperatures plunge, we start worrying, are the lights going to stay on? Am I going to stay warm? What are we doing as a state and as a grid in the next 5-10 years to make sure that maybe when the temperatures drop, we don't have to have this same conversation next year or the year after that?
But we certainly know a couple things are going to likely remain, true. One is Texas continues to grow economically, year over year. Texas is doing really well. A lot of people are moving to the state. Businesses are moving to the state. So that helps to drive electric demand up as a result of that, and requires infrastructure investments across the board. We've seen the state legislature take up this issue and finding ways to try to incentivize all different types of generation to get developed, including, thermal dispatchable generation. We're already seeing a lot of growth on the electric grid from renewable sources. We're seeing solar and wind growing on the electric grid year over year. We're seeing batteries growing very rapidly on the electric grid. We're seeing that every year, the additions of those resources, and they're making a big difference during the summers as well as during the winters. And so if we can add to that and balance that growth with some thermal dispatchable resources, which is what some of the legislation that was passed in the last session enabled and incentivized, then we're really going to be able to get to that place where we know we're going to be able to address whether it's the hottest day or the coldest winter without having as many reliability concerns as we sometimes do today.
You heard the ERCOT CEO refer to dispatchable energy. That focuses on electricity created by fossil fuels, which is considered to be available on demand. Texas lawmakers approved incentives to provide low-interest loans to build more dispatchable power plants. The election cycle in Texas is heating up, with Democrats hoping to replace incumbent Ted Cruz. However, the question remains, who do voters want in his place? What the polls show coming up.